The next setting I want to cover is set keyframes every. I generally just set this to whatever I have for the playback rate. In this case, 10. Having a higher keyframe rate can lower your clip's file size, but it can also in some cases lower your quality a little bit as well, but generally it doesn't affect the file size or the quality too much. If it's really high, it can also mess with your seeking, so I generally like to keep this usually maybe equal to or maybe 150% of what my playback rate is, but I usually for the most part I just leave it to whatever the playback rate is. I don't even bother with it beyond that. Above the keyframe setting is the quality slider, and this is usually set to 70 by default. I usually take this and drag it up to 100. While this will raise the file size, it usually isn't detrimentally so, and I found the improvement in the picture and the overall clarity to make it worthwhile. But depending on which compressor you have selected, the quality and keyframe settings might be completely ignored. Only certain compressors will actually use these two settings. Many will not. Next up is auto adjust, this little checkbox right here. If I click it, it enables this slider down here at the bottom of the window. By dragging this slider, I can adjust these three values at the same time. CamStudio is going to try to keep them set for a real-time capture rate, but if you notice, it doesn't always do a great job. You're not going to want to use 34, 29, and 34 if you are capturing audio and video at the same time, because simply the audio and video won't be in sync once you get done capturing. If I drag the slider all the way to the left, you'll notice I've maxed out the playback rate at 200 frames per second. Now if I drag it to the middle to about that time lapse, it'll go all the way down to 1 frame per second. Everything to the right of that is time lapsed or sped up, going down to a minimum playback rate of 1 frame per minute. Now as I said before, because these values aren't always good for audio and video capture, I generally just leave this disabled and enter these values in manually. The last settings I want to cover for the video options are the compressor settings. As you can see, by default, Microsoft Video 1 is selected. This isn't because Microsoft Video 1 is a great codec, it's because Microsoft Video 1 has been included with almost every Windows operating system since Windows 95 or earlier. I don't recommend you use it. Not only is it lossy, it's also limited to 8 or 16-bit color and still tends to produce quite large files. Not quite as large as, say, uncompressed RGB video, but still quite large. I like to use Lagarith Lossless instead. This is because it allows me to capture without losing any noticeable quality. Unlike lossy codecs, lossless codecs are designed to stay as close to your original video source as possible. On the other hand, lossy codecs remove parts of your original video. The trade-off is that lossy codecs can usually produce a lower file size than lossless codecs can. Lagarith is not the only lossless codec. The CamStudio lossless codec also works quite well. There's also the UT lossless codec and the MSU screen capture lossless codec. And there's many others as well. I just use the Lagarith lossless codec because I have more experience using it. There is one drawback to using the Lagarith lossless codec. That is that it can take a bit more processing power to encode and playback video than, say, the Microsoft Video 1 codec can. This can cause issues on older PCs, especially for capturing at a high resolution or a high frame rate. For the most part, though, I've found Lagarith to stack up fairly well against other lossless codecs for general use. However, because of the large file size Lagarith tends to produce, I usually re-encode my video to something lossy after I'm done editing it, such as DivX, Xvid, or H.264. If you don't need to do any editing, you might be able to get by recording straight to lossy. For those of you who didn't watch my previous video, you can get the codecs I've mentioned at these websites. You can get the CamStudio lossless codec at camstudio.org. The Lagarith lossless can be gotten at leetcodec.net. And I didn't mention it in this video, but the other one I use is ffdshow. It has a whole bunch of codecs built into it. Another good website is videohelp.com. Anyways, that just about covers it for the video options. Alright, the next thing to cover is the audio options. Audio options for microphone. I'm going to just drag this guy down a little bit. Now the first thing I want to get out of the way is this stereo versus mono thing. Unless you're doing some type of stereo mixing, there's no point in using stereo here. If you're just recording audio from your microphone and you're using stereo for your recording option, you're going to end up doubling the size of your audio track with no noticeable increase in quality. That's why I recommend that you use mono. This video itself was recorded in mono. As for the other audio settings, I've had good results using 22 kHz for the sampling rate at 16 bits per sample. For the compressed format, just as I did for video, I use lossless compression, in this case PCM. This is for the same reason I use lossless for the video, and just like with the video, if you don't need to do a lot of editing, you might be able to get by using a lossy option like MP3. The rest of the options here I generally don't mess with. Now there is this MCI recording option down here. This will override whatever you have set for these audio settings up here and use your system defaults instead. In some cases this can fix stability, quality, and syncing issues, but I'd only recommend using this as a last resort. When I use this option, CamStudio records the audio in stereo with a 44 kHz sampling rate at 32 bits per sample, making the file size for the audio track roughly 5 to 10 times larger than it would have been with the settings I usually use, 22 kHz and 16 bits per sample. So I generally recommend you leave this option disabled unless you find the audio just isn't working for you using the other settings. Anyway, that's it for the audio settings.